So two-tier architecture goes in this way. Okay, application and database will be there, but they are there in the same room, which we don't want. So in three-tier architecture, so how many layers will be there? 3 layers will be there: client layer, application layer, database layer, separate. Now what we are going to do? We are going to divide all the 3 layers. Client layer is also called as a presentation layer. App layer is called as a business logic layer, where the source code of the application will be available. And database layer is also called as database layer, where the database information will be available. Okay, right. TCP and UDP protocols will work usually on the app layer and database layer. We will see that in the VPC also, because we have the model called OSI model. In the OSI model, we'll talk about that. But TCP and UDP protocols will work mostly in app and database layer. It depends. Now, let's say you have 10 GB RAM. Okay, you have 10 GB RAM. And your intention is to divide the Tom and Jerry. Your intention is to divide the Tom and Jerry. Okay, right. Now, let's say for for Jerry, you have created a separate room that's called as app layer. For Tom, you have created a separate room that's called as a database layer. Sir, for layer is nothing but a server, sir. Nothing much here. Layer means a server only. Now, for any server, what will be there, sir? Hardware components will be there. Operating system will be there. Application will be there. For app layer, separate hardware components, separate operating system with separate capacity. Application will be launched on the application layer. And then for database also, hardware components will be there. Separate operating system with separate capacity will be there. On top of it, we are going to host the database. We are going to host the database. So now the problem is solved. 50% of the problem is solved. What is that 50% of the problem solving? I have successfully divided the app layer and database layer separately. App layer and database layer separately, which is done. Now, the question is how the communication between the app layer and database layer will happen. They should have a communication, right? They should have a communication. But how this communication will take place? How the app server and database server communicates with each other. If they want to communicate with each other, what should be there, sir? What should be there? They should be available in the same network. But before that, for every server that you are going to create, there will be an IP address. We will see that in the next sessions, we will see how that IP address will come and how we can use that IP address also, we will see. IP address will be there for every server. Even for your system, for your laptop, there will be IP address. For your mobile phone, there will be an IP. For every electronic gadgets, there will be an IP address. Similarly, for app server and database server also, there will be an IP addresses will be there. Sir, if you want to have a communication between 2 different IP addresses, they must be there in a same network. Sir, how we will create the network? In AWS, we have a service which is called as VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. We will create the network here, private network, not a public network. In this network, what we will do is we will create these 2 servers, and then we will give the internet access to these servers. We will create the internet access to these servers. When you give internet access, obviously the communication will happen. But again, here there is one more thing. Let's say client is there. Okay, what client will do? Client will always try to access the application. And then when client wants to access the application, in VPC, there are 2 concepts that are there. One is called as a public subnet and the other one is called as a private subnet. If you don't know about subnets, let's call it as public connectivity, private connectivity. Okay, public connectivity and private connectivity. Sir, now you have in VPC, you have publicly you can connect privately also. Sir, now you tell me, client wants to access the application. Will you keep the application in the public connectivity or the private connectivity? The question is simple.
Public.
Will you keep the application? Because client wants to access the application. Will you keep the application in the public subnet or in the private subnet?
Private subnet.
Public subnet. Right. So whoever are telling public subnet, actually we don't keep it in the public subnet. I'll tell you what is the problem with that. So let's assume that you have kept the server, you have kept the application server in the public subnet. When you keep the application server in the public subnet, you have the code which is also installed. The code will also be deployed in the application layer. Now, is there a chance that code will be hacked? Outsiders can take the code. Whatever you have developed, developers has taken some 1 year to develop the code, and you kept in the public subnet. When you kept in the public subnet, anything is accessible that is available in the public subnet. Now that means your code will be secure, sir. Obviously, your code is not secure. So that means you should not keep the app server in the public subnet. Now, there is another question. Now you might tell that, sir, we'll keep it in the private subnet so that code will be safe. That is good. Code is safer. But what about applications, sir? Will the client will be able to access the application? No. So there is a problem again. If you keep it in the public subnet, source code which is available in the application layer will be taken by the third-party servers or hackers, which is a problem. If you keep it in the private subnet, code will be secure, but application, it's not accessible. It's not accessible. We'll see how to overcome that. We'll see it in some time. Now coming to the database server. So where will you keep the database server? Will you keep it in the public subnet or private subnet?
Private, sir.
Private subnet. Do you want the end users to access the database? No. Only the company people will access. Only the team who is working on the project, they'll access. That's it. You don't want the outsiders to access your database. So database server, you will keep it in the private subnet by default. Nobody can access except the internal users or the company people. Okay, nobody can access that. Right. So now, since the client has to connect with the application, this is what I was asking. Do we need to keep in the public subnet or private subnet? We have just talked about that. If you keep it in the public subnet, there is a problem. So you will keep the application server and database server both in the private subnets only. Remember that. Both in the private subnets only. Sir, if you keep in the private subnet, what will happen, sir? Client cannot access the application. But I want client to access the application. If client is not accessing the application, what is the point in creating this much thing? There is no point. So for that, we are going to use another layer which is called as web layer. Sir, up to here it's 3-tier architecture. Sir. Client layer is one layer, app layer is another layer, database layer is another layer. 3-tier architecture is done here. But with 3-tier architecture also there is a problem. So we will go with 4-tier architecture, or you can also call it as n-tier architecture. N means infinity. You can create as many layers as you want. It depends upon the requirement. Sir, web layer we will create. Sir, what we will do in the web layer is we will create the configuration files. Okay, in the web layer is also called as web server. Web server will also have the IP address. In the web server, we will keep only the configuration files. Sir, what does it mean by configuration files? Sir, I will do only the settings here. I will do only the settings. This one, what I will do is, whatever traffic that is coming to access the application, I want all the traffic to go through the web layer. What web layer will do? It will check whether it is coming from the trusted source or not. If it is from the trusted source, it will access the application it will give the access to application. Remember, if you are getting the access to application, that doesn't mean you are accessing the app server. You are only accessing the application. How you are accessing? Because in the web layer, we are keeping the system configuration files. Setting files will keep here. The setting files will take care. It will not allow you to access the server, app server. It will only allow you to access the application alone. That's it. You cannot take the code. You cannot do anything there. So here, when client requests a resource, and client wants to access the application, the request will go to the web layer. In the web layer, the configuration will be checked. If the configuration is proper, the web layer will transfer. Okay, the web layer will transfer the request to the app layer. From the app layer, the request will be transferred to the database layer. From the database layer, we'll get the response to the app server. From the app server, we'll get the response to the web server. From the web server, we'll get response to the client. And that is how you will access the applications. Every application that you are accessing as of now, they are all being accessed in this way. So let's say you are accessing youtube.com. Can you access the youtube.com website or youtube.com application server? Can you access the youtube.com code, sir? No. That means application we have kept in the private subnet, but we are still able to access it. How? It is all because of the web server. It is all because of the web server. So this is all about the web server or 3-tier architecture. Sir, web server, where you are going to keep it, sir? You are going to keep it in the public subnet or private subnet?
Public only.
Public subnet. Why? Even though if you keep it in the public subnet, you will still be not able to access the web server. You cannot access the system configuration files and all those things. Again, there will be an internal networking will be there where you cannot access them. So one of you are telling the network engineer, you have worked as a network engineer. Probably what I am telling, you can authenticate whether this is right or wrong on a large scale, not at a networking level, but as a part of DevOps engineer level. Right. So this is about the 3-tier architecture. Sir, what are the different web servers that are available? Apache Tomcat is one web server. Apache is another web server. Nginx is another web server. These are 3 commonly used web servers. Among all these 3, Apache Tomcat is the most commonly used web servers, especially for Java-based projects. If your application is developed by using Java programming language, all those applications will be hosted in the Tomcat web server. We will see separated project video is also, project session is also there on Tomcat. We will see that also during that session. But it's too early to know how Tomcat will work on that. We have to learn a couple of tools before that. Okay, so this is about a 3-tier architecture. Sir, is it clear for everyone, sir? 3-tier architecture. By using 3-tier architecture, we can develop the web application. That means whatever applications that you are seeing currently in the market, all are web applications. If you want to access the web application, for sure you should have an internet connection. For sure you should have an internet connection. And these are something which are commonly used. There is a project that is also going to come up with the 3-tier architecture, but it won't be as a part of DevOps classes, it will be a part of AWS classes, because we have to use many AWS services for this. We'll see that in the AWS class, but just remember the concept, because the same concept will be used in the DevOps classes also. So that is why I'm going with this one here. Okay. So web server, app server, these are just things. You can take a snapshot of this one and you can just have a look into them. You can just have a look, have a screenshot or snapshot, whatever that is comfortable. You just go through it. They are all self-explanatory things only.